Hi, everyone. Welcome to interCHANGE. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. We have lots to talk about today. Less than 40 days until the governor's election. We'll talk about whether it has been a good week or a bad week for Mary Burke and Scott Walker. We'll talk about the fight that's shaping up over where a new home for the Milwaukee Bucks should be built. And we will talk about the disastrous end to the Milwaukee Brewers season and what happens next. Okay, let me introduce everybody. You know longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Kevin Fischer, who spent many years as a broadcast journalist. Of course, Denise Callaway, communications and public relations professional. And Gerard Randall, education consultant and job creation expert. Rick Horowitz is going to be along with commentary at the end of the show. Okay, let's talk first about the governor's race. Michelle Obama will be coming to Wisconsin Monday to campaign for Mary Burke. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie will be here to campaign for Scott Walker. Interesting because so many critics say that any association with the Obama administration is bad for Mary Burke and any association with polarizing Christie is bad for Scott Walker. But obviously the candidates themselves don't agree, and they're both welcoming the support, Denise.
They are, and you know, I think it's good. It makes this race a little more interesting, and maybe we can start talking about some real issues rather than whether or not someone used part of a jobs plan that was working in another state to bring it forward in Wisconsin. I for one, feel if there is a jobs plan that's working someplace else and we can borrow parts of it, there's nothing wrong with that because the one that we have sure isn't working. You know, to answer your earlier question, it was not the best week for either candidate. There are these false issues of plagiarism that are following Mary Burke, and certainly, you know, we saw another 43,000 jobs gone from Wisconsin, which takes us even further away from the 250,000 that the governor promised, and obviously even the Journal-Sentinel said we're not going to see.
Kevin, do you think Michelle Obama is a plus for Mary Burke?
Wait a minute, isn't she married to Barack Obama, and isn't his popularity numbers south of the equator? I mean, he's
married, yeah.
He is viewed as lamer than a lame duck president right now. Extremely unpopular. I mean, the numbers say it all. So I'm not sure you get a lot. I don't think you get a lot by inviting her to speak on your behalf. And I want to respond to my good friend Denise Callaway.
Yes, Callaway.
It was a horrible week for Mary Burke. That's a real scandal that people get. It has brought down political campaigns in the past. And her defense is, well, I didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. That's even worse. You said that this would be the showpiece, the hallmark of your campaign for months and months and months, and the press bought it. And then we find out she didn't even know what was in her own jobs plan. And when the press asked her, well, define plagiarism, that's a pretty simple question, which is the kind she gets these days. She couldn't even define what plagiarism is. And I must say, personally, it's startling to me that Mary Burke is defended by supposed journalists who should know better. They should be professional and ethical and not defend outright plagiarism. So, and the more these things come out about Mary Burke, who's an empty suit, there's no there. There's no there. She has no ideas of her own. She has no plans. She can't answer a tough question if she ever gets one. And we find out now that she's in love with Obamacare. The more people find out about her, I think you're going to see some separation between these two candidates.
Do you think she's running a good campaign?
I think so. As a matter of fact, she's running even with the incumbent when a whole lot of people didn't even know who she was. I think the Journal-Sentinel is in worse trouble than we thought if they have reporters there who don't know what plagiarism is. The fact that they spent a solid week with a story every day about something that was not plagiarism, and about a jobs plan, they haven't spent a solid week explaining her jobs plan.
Thank you.
Or a solid week explaining, you know, Scott Walker's lack of a jobs plan and why he has failed, why he's one of the worst governors in the country in creating jobs. You know, the question is, what's in that jobs plan? She supports everything in that jobs plan. The fact that a consultant who worked on the plan, you know, use the same words that he's used elsewhere. That is not plagiarism. You can't plagiarize yourself. And for reporters, to not know that, or they do know it, and there's some editor there who just wants to say, well, let's be sure and trash Mary Burke every day on this.
The Journal Sentinel?
On this. The Journal Sentinel. The Journal Sentinel, which endorsed Scott Walker. Yeah, absolutely.
Because they love him so much.
I really want to see a discussion about the 2 jobs plans, and we haven't seen it yet. We certainly haven't seen it from the Journal Sentinel. They spent all this time trashing her. The difference between Republicans and Democrats on job creation, everyone knows. Democrats actually want to create jobs. Republicans don't. Democrats believe the way you create jobs is to put money in the hands of the middle class and folks who spend all their money every week.
That's why they tax us to
and they
death.
spend it, and that builds the economy because then we have to hire more people to provide more goods and services. The Republican jobs plan is give money to the people at the top, and it will trickle down eventually to the middle class. That is why 2/3 of Scott Walker's tax cuts go to the upper class, go to the top 1%. And
PolitiFact said that's wrong, by the way, this week.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work. Those people don't spend all their money. They invest their money all around the world, wherever they can make the most money. The way you create jobs is to build a healthy middle class, and Scott Walker has not done that. In fact, he blew a $3 billion hole in Wisconsin's economy, and that's why he failed to create jobs. Let's talk about that.
You know, I was talking to a huge Walker supporter the other day, and he said Mary Burke is a horrible candidate. She's just a horrible candidate. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if she's really such a horrible candidate, why is she in a statistical dead heat with the governor?
That's an easy one.
That you have in this state people who basically are 45 for the Dems, 45 for Republicans, no matter who the candidate is.
Correct.
You could run a deceased Lincoln against a deceased Jefferson, and you're going to get 45-45 to start with. Unfortunately, in this time, that polarization is what causes people to be stuck on absolute support for candidates without even considering, as Joel would have you want to do, their positions. The 45%, it really doesn't matter to them. It's that 10% that's in the middle, and it's that 10% that they're now fighting over. Actually, it's probably closer to 8%. That they're fighting over people who haven't yet made up their minds, or maybe they've made up their minds and they're just waiting for a little bit more evidence to determine which of those 2 candidates they want. That's why you see Michelle Obama in here. That's why you see Chris Christie in here, so that they can, one, rev up their base, because both are going to have their base secure. Christie will help with a piece of the base for Walker. The First Lady will help with a piece of the base for Burke, and then they're going to have to go out in these debates that are coming up and try to make the case to the voters who are going to be watching and very concerned about where do the 2 differ and how do they support what I'm most interested in.
One thing that's interesting, though, is that when you take a look at the 2 surrogates who are coming into campaign, Michelle Obama's ratings are much higher than the president's. She also has much greater crossover popularity with Republicans than Chris Christie has with Democrats. So I think that's one of the things that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
And turning out, you know, both sides, you've always said, is exactly what
turnout's key.
There's no question about that. But as a matter of fact, when Scott Walker, you know, everyone's known his positions from the start. And he doesn't seem to be able to build on that. And I think that's the big concern for the Republican Party.
All right, next topic. Kind of a ground-shaking suggestion about where to build a new home for the Milwaukee Bucks from the son of the woman who gave them millions and millions of dollars to build the Bradley Center. David Eline says the Bradley Center, the arena, the old auditorium, now called the Milwaukee Theater, should all be torn down and a new sports temple built on that chunk of land. Almost immediately, mover and shaker Frank Gimbel, who oversees the board which runs the convention center, the arena, the theater, says that's a horrible, horrible idea. This is going to get interesting, isn't it?
Oh, sure it is. First off, I think there's a lot of merit to what David Eline had to say. One of the things that it does do that people haven't talked about, it revives this notion of an arena on the UWM campus, which for the most part had been put on hold for some time. And if that's the case, then UWM will have to build someplace, or they would have to have some housing in this new facility, which I don't think they're going to have. I think Marquette will be the player in that because Marquette currently generates a larger crowd, thus more revenue. The other idea, though, was that private backers will be able to front the money to get it built. So the presumption is that he would be one of those. And he certainly, along with his sister, sit on top of a great deal of wealth. They could probably come up with that other $100 million, along with others, to get the facility built. And then if you tear down the auditorium and the arena, that tax money would then be utilized to support the operating cost of the new facility. So it has some merit. I think that's one of the things that they're certainly going to juggle around. It would then fix the location of the facility downtown. I'm not so sure. I'm personally in agreement with that. I'd still love to see it down in the valley where there really is an entertainment district. But if that's one of the ways that you can get the facility built without tax dollars and then transfer the tax funding for operating cost over to this new facility, it might have some legs.
You know, based on your history, you know very well Frank Gimbel doesn't lose too many battles.
Yeah, but he's also kind of predictable at times. And you know, the Bradley Center was trying to get those taxes away from Frank Gimbel before. And he won. He kept it, you know, in his facilities, and the Bradley Center was shut out. The interesting thing about the Bradley Center, when they first built it, they didn't want anything to do with government. They intentionally, you know, had a board that had no government people on it. It was going to be run privately. This kind of goes against that Republican philosophy that everything's run better privately. You know, the truth of the matter is they need some tax support in order to maintain. I know that Frank's fighting for his facilities, but I think it makes a lot of sense. If you're going to have, as part of this new arena, what they've always said from the beginning, it's not just an arena for basketball, it's an entertainment complex. If you're really going to have a substantial entertainment complex downtown, those two facilities that Frank's trying to hang on and protect, they're going to be in worse trouble than they are now. Right. And I think, you know, make it part of the convention district, put it under his domain, and he might have a little different attitude. You know, I don't know that we're there yet, but I was talking to someone pretty close to this just yesterday, and he thinks it's getting closer and closer, and he also thinks that some of the people involved now have a lot of influence on the governor, and that, in fact, could make a difference, too.
Kevin, a lot of people also think that it makes perfect sense to build it in a big chunk of vacant Park East land, which has been vacant for years and years.
Seems to make sense to me. We've been arguing for, gosh, I don't know how many years, what to do about that. We consider it to be valuable prime real estate, and it is, but nobody wants to come up with a final answer as to what to do there. I'm not so sure, given the history of this place, which I've lived in all my life, that a decision is right down the road, because we seem to take our time and then again we use more time, and before we come up with a final decision. And
the NBA deadline helps that.
Well, it does, and I think it seems to me that the owners will have to eventually come forward and put their mouth where their money is and tell us where they want it to be, because it's very difficult to tell the owners if they have a specific site that they are married to.
And clearly they do.
That you have to go somewhere else. Right. We saw that with Miller Park. The idea was that it was going to be next to the old county stadium, and you were not going to get Bud Selig to move it downtown. So. There's so many sites, possible sites being talked about, and they all have some pros and they all have some cons. I would like to see it at Park East or the Valley, or down at the lakefront. To me, seems the #1 spot. If you could find a way to put it near those coach yards and make your entertainment district there. And the one thing I don't like about this one mega complex idea is that, okay, is that going to afford all the other entertainment entities that come to town now, that do go to the arena, the Disney on Ices and so forth?
Is it ample?
Where are they going to go if you tear down these facilities? And then in the short term, if you start tearing down stuff, in downtown Milwaukee, it's going to cause disruption and chaos, and that's not a good thing.
Denise, I don't know if the people of Milwaukee are going to have much say at all, but I cannot.
Limited.
There's not going to be any referendum on it.
Limited,
Not
I
in
believe.
Milwaukee
Yeah.
accepting them ripping down the Milwaukee Theater, which they just put millions into, ripping down the arena, and ripping down the Bradley Center.
I think it's a hard sell. I believe what they're banking on is the fact that there is this NBA deadline. And if we want to keep the team, we need to make some decisions about what we're going to do. And quite frankly, because there is this real reluctance on the part of tax dollars being used for this, wherever that private money can come from, I think is what's going to drive this decision. I would not look forward to seeing these buildings come down. I wouldn't look forward to the disruption it's going to cause. But at the end of the day, if taxpayers are not going to be substantial players in this, and clearly there is no appetite for that, then where people are able to cut a deal to get this built is where it's going to be built. One thing that's interesting about this idea that's been floated by Dave Eline is that we haven't talked too much about what the expansion of the convention space really means. We lose so many conventions here because we don't have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 more feet of exhibit space. It is that tight. This is a highly competitive marketplace when it comes to bringing these conventions to town that bring money into town. I think that is one advantage that this plan has. It takes a look at what can be done with that facility that makes it much more marketable and much more profitable, and quite frankly, is going to bring more money into Milwaukee.
Doesn't it strike anybody here, though odd or even astounding, that you have people suggesting that we tear down the Bradley Center as if it's this eyesore, that it's this ancient dinosaur, when I think most people, top of mind would say, that's odd. That's crazy.
Yep,
It's a
right.
nice building. I know it doesn't meet NBA standards, but and for the Mrs. Pettit, I don't know what she would think. Her own son suggesting
That's between
That's
the two
why
of
it
them.
was floated.
that building that she paid for be raised.
Right.
To me, that I don't understand that.
All right, next topic. So the Milwaukee Brewers end their season this weekend with a homestand against the Chicago Cubs. Once again, the Brewers will not be going into postseason play because of a disastrous end to a season that started out so wonderfully. Do you expect any major shakeups to the organization, maybe even as early as Monday morning? Or is everything just going to be the same?
Everything will not be the same. I think we can say that. The trouble is, I don't know quite what to tell them to do, and I know our job here is to tell all these people what to do. But the truth of the matter was, early in the season, everything was so great. Winning built on itself. But then losing started to build on itself. Mm-hmm. And some of the things they were best at, defense, started going south after their offense went south. Pitching was great, mostly all season, not just the starting pitching especially, but the bullpen mostly too. If I were Doug Melvin, I don't know what I'd do. I know Mark Attanasio will do something. He does things, he makes moves, he doesn't settle for not winning. So I think there'll be some changes, maybe some major changes. But one of the things they said about the offense is, well, there are too many free swingers, and when they're hot, we don't have anybody that's hot now. So it's not just the free swingers that were doing it. People like Ryan Braun, and he's had injury problems. We hear, Ramirez, he's not a free swinger. He's a solid player, but
Can't ask much more of a guy that's near 40.
Exactly. So I can't put my finger on it at all. It was just a nightmare to watch.
Is Ron Reineke going to be a sacrificial lamb, or do you have to look at the general manager who's had a few managers who haven't won?
3 weeks ago, I thought both of them would be out of here. And it's still my expectation that there's going to be some bloodletting in the clubhouse, at least among the management.
I think Doug Melvin, it's hard to fault him.
Except to the degree that that's the person that has to keep these players motivated. And if it's a motivational issue, then
No, the coach keeps them motivated. As well.
Well-
Melvin, the general manager, they said go out and get some pitching, and he did it.
He did.
he found the guys that ultimately are out there on the field, and he's the one who's going to have to determine whether or not the manager is the one that's going to have to stay if he wants his job. So I'm thinking that there's going to be a major overhaul, and I also think there's going to be a lot of new faces on the field come next season.
Kevin, April, May, June, July, everybody was saying Reineke was brilliant, the general manager is brilliant, the players are great. All of a sudden, everything changed.
And that's part of the problem here is that they played so well early on, and they got everybody's hopes up very high that I think we were overconfident, and it's the truth. Since then, they've been a 500 team. And every team goes through injuries and slides and periods where they're not playing their best. But we went through not one but two horrendous slides where we weren't talking 3-game, 4-game losing streaks. We're talking losing 10 out of 11, not once but twice. And then you have injuries, yes, every team goes through them.
Right.
Ryan Braun, I think it was not only physical, but I think there were some mental issues going on. I think his head was messed up with everything that's happened in his personal life. And you never had, when the team was down, a couple of players that took the team on their shoulders and got them through it. They all played miserably, and it's a shame because at the end, boy, the pitching, you couldn't ask much more of them. And the bullpen, I think, was tired, was worn out.
They played so many close games that all season they played close games.
Winning the ones earlier.
What does that, Nazio, have?
It does fall on the general manager because he's responsible for putting people on the field.
But what does that, Nazio, do to make sure that now, after the last game of the season, people are looking forward to next year?
Well, I think you do have to do more changes on the field. I really do, because we've talked about what the general manager is supposed to do. We've talked about what the manager, coach is supposed to do. The reality of it is, these are talented people who are making a heck of a lot of money. And if the issue is motivation, I think you have to question whether or not you have the right people on the field, not necessarily whether or not you have the right people in the clubhouse, and whether or not you have the right people who are general managers. So I do think he's going to make some changes. I think we may see both the general manager and the coach gone. I really do expect that. But, that is the easy thing to do. I think the thing that's much harder is to figure out how you motivate these young men who shouldn't need any motivation to really, say, I'm going to step up. I have every one of those players has the ability to step up and carry the team on their shoulders, has the ability to really think smarter about the game. Baseball is so much a game, more so I think than basketball, football, or hockey. Is really it's a game of the mind as much as a physical game. So I think you have to ask yourself, you got the right people on the field.
Here's one thing to know, though. There were 4 teams in our division that could have won that division. We were looking at them all year long. And Cincinnati ended up even worse off than we are. And they could easily have won that division, we would have said earlier in this.
The Cardinals, from the beginning of the season, just got better and better and better while we were gradually deteriorating. That didn't help.
All right, we continue. Well, he may have run for the White House partly to end a war in the Middle East, but this week President Obama expanded one, with the U.S. leading a coalition of nations in attacking ISIS facilities in Syria as well as Iraq. Going to war is always a serious undertaking, but Rick Horowitz finds it at least a bit of relief in all those talking heads who claim to have simple solutions to the turmoil in that part of the world. Rick.
Let me see if I can lay it out for you. It's actually pretty straightforward. Middle East country A is threatened by Islamic terrorist group B, which is based in Middle East country C. Middle East country C has long been a rival of Middle East country A and also of Middle East country D, which provides secret funding to Islamic terrorist group E. Terrorist group E is an offshoot of terrorist group F, which used to get some of its funding from country A, but is now totally committed to country A's destruction. Middle East countries G, H, and I are determined to overthrow the brutal dictator running country C, although countries G and I haven't gotten along in years and can't be seen as working together on anything, not even eliminating country C's brutal dictator. Now, Middle East country I used to be an ally of Middle East country C and provided it with advisors and weapons until some of those weapons fell into the hands of terrorist group J, which nobody had ever heard of until about an hour and a half ago. Terrorist Group J wants to overthrow the monarchies in countries H and K, and may even be getting secret support for its effort from the monarchy in country D, whose leader had a falling out with those other leaders last year over something or other. Meanwhile, oil-rich Middle East countries LMNOP are contending with local insurgencies Q, R, S, T, and U, not to mention some spillover from Islamic terrorist group B, which you'll recall is based in country C, and whose sanctuaries straddle the border with three of those other countries, and also with Middle East country V. Except that terrorist group B forged an alliance years ago with oil-rich countries M and O, and also with not-so-oil-rich country W, which wanted help in battling Islamic terrorist group X, which, as you know, launched a bloody crackdown on terrorist group F in 1953. Terrorist Group X, of course, receives financial backing from Middle East country Y to try to establish a caliphate in Middle East country Z, except on weekends and religious holidays when countries Y and Z, and maybe even P, are best friends forever. This week. Any questions?
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.